Hello guys, today I'm going to explain one of the communication models, which is the Osgood Schramm circular model of communication, and I hope you learn something with it and enjoy the video. So before we get into the model, who is Charles Egerton Osgood? Osgood was a distinguished American psychologist who developed a technique for measuring the connotative meaning of concept known as the semantic differential. It was in 1954 that Charles Osgood presented his theory, popularized the idea that communication was circular rather than linear, meaning that it requires two participants taking turns sending and receiving a message. But Wilbur Schramm changed this theory of the meaning into a model, and after this model became the circular model of communication. It explains how we communicate with one another, mainly through speech, writing, and discourse. It is emphasized into four principles. First one is that communication is circular and not linear. The listener can both receive and send messages. Second is that communication is usually equal and reciprocal. Third, that there is a lot of interpretation involved when receiving a message. And lastly, that all communication requires three steps. These are the encoding, decoding, and interpreting a message. So this is the Osgood-Schramm circular model of communication. The image shows how the Osgood-Schramm model works. It involves circular communication between two people. Each person is both a sender and a receiver. They are therefore able to communicate to one another rather than only in one direction. The model function consists of the encoder, interpreter, and the decoder of the message. Here's how each step works. For example, these two people right here are an example of participants in making a communication.
Great. How are you? I'm doing great. What about
The first step is the encoder. Encoder are those who does the encoding or sends the message. And take note that we want to send a message, we need to think about how to create it in order to get our message across clearly. We need to think of the right words to say and in what order we should send our message to communicate our ideas to the message receiver.
if you want,
The
I can
second
talk to
step
them
is the decoder.
so that they can get
Decoder
you
are
the
those who
apartment.
receive the
So
message and the
just
one
quick
who
email for
interprets the
you. So you
received
provide me the numbers of the
message.
brokers.
And
I'll
when
directly
receiving
have
a
a word with
message,
them and
we
find a
need to
place
use our
according to
reading
my
skills,
requirements.
listening skills,
Actually, I do
etc.
not
to
have
decode the
a
message,
direct contact
so it
number
will
of
make
some
sense to
broker or
us.
something. But
The
give
next
me a
step
couple of
is
days.
the
I'll just have a
interpreter.
word with them and
This
let
is
me
where the
see if
person
they
tries to
can provide you
understand
some
or
broker's number.
interprets the
It will
message.
definitely help
What
you.
does it mean to you,
Thank you
or
so
what are they
much.
trying to
So
convey,
how do you commute
etc.
every day?
And take note
Sometimes
that
by
one
cab and
person may
sometimes by
interpret the
metro.
message in a
Oh,
totally
okay.
different
So it
way
must be
to
pretty hectic
someone
for you,
else.
isn't it? It is. But in fact,
This is where Schramm adapted the model and added the notion of the field of experience, or the commonality of the two. In the process of interpretation, however, a lot of meaning can be lost. They call the lost or misinterpretation of information the semantic noises, caused by these semantic barriers. So what are those semantic barriers? Semantic barriers are specifically the values, beliefs, and background knowledge that impact how someone sends and how someone receives messages. As a two-way communication keeps on going in its circular pattern, the semantic noise is ideally reduced because the two communicators can come to shared meaning and give one another further clarification on what they actually mean. So what are the pros and cons of the Osgood-Schramm model? For the benefits or strengths in the Osgood-Schramm model, first, it shows how feedback can work. Second, it recognizes that communication is complex. And lastly, it sees us as an active communicators. For the disadvantages and weakness in the Osgood-Schramm model is that it doesn't recognize that communication can be unequal. There are many circumstances where communication may involve one authority figure talking and one or many listeners trying to interpret the message. Or to be precise, it doesn't work for mass communication. More like it only works on one-to-one person communication.